Hello and welcome to my latest Terraria World Tour. So finally, after around 3 or even maybe 4 years, I've finished building a house for every single main Terraria NPC. Now a lot of people have been asking me when I'll release the world file, and I will address that at the end of the video, but for now, let's just get straight into it. So first up we have my pirate NPC house, Shipwreck Cove. The inspiration for this one obviously comes from Pirates of the Caribbean, which features a very similar fortress comprised of shipwrecks stacked on top of each other. Now I wanted to avoid building just a regular single pirate ship for the pirate, so I thought this was the next best thing. And next we have the Crab Shack, the Angler NPC house. Now I'm going to spend a little less time on builds that I've shown in previous world tours, just because I imagine most people watching will probably have already seen those. So for this one, I'm just going to say that I was very inspired by a game called Sunhaven, which is very similar to Stardew Valley, and there is a fisherman in that game that has a bait shop that looks very similar to this. Moving on, we have the Dryad NPC house, with the idea being that she lives in an old tree stump in the middle of a jungle pond, and that thing on the left there was supposed to be a lotus flower. And the Dryad's house conjoins nicely with the Witch Doctor's, with this little tiki head bridge, and of course, if it wasn't obvious, for his house I just built a giant dinosaur skull, and then pretty much just fashioned the build around that. And I was very happy that I finally got to use the leopard skin in a build, because I was trying to fit it into like little NPC houses for ages, but just couldn't fit it in anywhere. And moving on, we have the paint factory. The idea being that the painter is extracting dyes from these giant jungle flowers in order to produce paint. I do try and put some kind of story or some kind of logic in these builds, even if the logic wouldn't actually make sense in the real world. But yeah, this one's definitely one of my favorites. Onwards, we have the Nurse NPC house. Now I'll just zoom out a little just so you can see the full thing. And this one is actually based entirely around a Fable health potion. So I wasn't sure what to do with the nurse for quite a while, because I didn't just want to build a simple hospital. So I opted for this design instead. Now, there are health potions in Terraria, so it makes sense that the nurse would live in a building shaped like one, given her associations with healing. And Fable health potions were an obvious choice because, well, just look at them. They are gorgeous. And the trees around the build are similar to those in Witchwood in Fable, because one of the original ideas I had for this was just to build something similar to the Temple of Avo from Fable. And next we have the Arms Dealer. I decided on a desert oasis style area, with the arms dealer running a shooting range in a build with a huge shotgun and a huge target sign. Then we have the palm tree on the right growing out of a giant goat skull. And this is the wizard's house, a Middle Eastern inspired palace, and you can see on the left we also have a cave of wonders straight from Aladdin. And just like the Cave of Wonders from Aladdin, you can enter, and there is a huge treasure trove inside, and also even a little genie lamp. Here we have the Dye Trader house, with the coloured candles meant to act as an advertisement for his shop or his business. Now, I imagine someone walking through the desert maybe at night, and then they see this huge colourful candle display glowing in the distance. I kind of imagined it similar to a medieval version of a neon sign. And here we have the Shiminator. Now, the Shiminator is an overly complex machine that I use for shimmering NPCs. I'll turn it on now so you can see it in action. And as you can tell, this build took a lot of complex wiring, so it was quite a great learning experience, and overall this is one of my favourites. I just love the mad science aesthetic, and with all the effects that it has, it's definitely one of the most complicated builds I've ever done. And yeah, I just think it looks great. And here we have the Masters Lair. the clothier's house. So I built this entire thing just from the name Doormaster, which is the name of a mace in Fable. And I decided on like a really creepy build with a carnival-like tent, shelves full of dolls or mannequins that the clothier creates clothes from. And you can see in the center of the tent there is a loom that sits on top of a giant pile of fabric. And I just imagine him sat on that loom, spinning clothes, cackling. And here we have the ancient fire blossom tree. Now, the idea is that this was the first fire blossom, a magical plant that is the essence of fire. And we have the demolitionist making a pilgrimage to this ancient plant in his little lava steamboat, because the demolitionist is a fellow fire enjoyer. Here we have the Truffle's house. Now, I wanted to avoid building a giant mushroom house as much as possible, so I decided that the truffle is an Ophiocordyceps fungus, which is a fungus that infects insects, mind controls them, and then uses their bodies to release more fungal spores. And that was the unfortunate fate of this giant grasshopper you can see here. Here we have the Witchwood Festival. Now I wanted to combine the Witchwood area and Fable with the night market from Stardew Valley, so I wanted all the woods and the ruins, along with the magical element from Stardew. And here we have the Ogre Stall, the Travelling Merchant Cart. Next to that we have the Zoologist House, the idea being that she's a carnival performer. That means she can transform into a fox. And then finally we have the Guide's Tent. So here is the golfer's house. Now I shimmered him into his fox form and built him a fox den style house under this tree. The entrance to the den is a golf hole, and there are loads of little details or elements that I really love in this build. One example is using the poo blocks to create the fly particle effect around the honey blocks to imitate bees in a nest. And here we have a huge fortress, which is the area that I tackle any invasion type event in this world. Inspired primarily by Sen's fortress in Dark Souls, we can see several similar elements, like for example the triple gate, the cogs and the gears in the upper sections. Also, like Sen's fortress, this build has boulders, lots of them. And next up is the Party Girl and the Tavern Keep House, an inn shaped like a beer keg that drains magical sap from this tree in order to brew particularly potent beer. Now the tree is supposed to gain its magical properties from the enchanted night crawlers that live in the roots. And next we have the Piggy Tank, which is home to the tax collector NPC. Now, I didn't want to build a typical Victorian mansion for this guy. I mean, he does look like Scrooge, so that comes naturally, but I wanted something a little bit more unique. So this is what I came up with. He is the tax collector, so a piggy bank makes sense. And I wanted a way for him to be able to actually extort all this tax from NPCs, thus giving birth to the idea of the Piggy Tank. Now, this one is toggleable with wiring as well, so you can turn it on, which turns the eyes on, causes smoke to come out the exhausts, and causes fire to emit from the nostrils. And in front of it you can see this ruined house, and this was the house of some unfortunate NPC that did not pay his tax and is no longer around. Next we have Hor Frost Scrapyard, home to the mechanic, the goblin tinkerer and the cyborg. Now I took inspiration from Borderlands 1, particularly areas like the Trash Coast that just have these piles of smouldering scrap all over the place. And you can see the cyborg lives in like a little robot type thing. The mechanic is like the queen of the scrap heap. She has like this little house on top. And the goblin tinkerer has his little scrap cave with like a giant robotic dragon head on top. Next, the stylist. She lives on the beach in a giant seashell that also functions as her hair salon. And the little machines inside are supposed to be reminiscent of those giant hairdryer type things that used to exist in salons back in like the 90s and early 2000s. And here we have my Steampunk Piranha. One of my earliest builds that I was actually really impressed with. It's of course home to the Steampunker, and in essence it's just a giant piranha styled steampunk submarine. And here we have an eerie graveyard. Now I needed some echo blocks, and to get echo blocks you need to buy them from a graveyard area from the cyborg. And it's as simple as that. Not really much more to say about this. And here we have the Princess House. She's locked in a tower and is visited by a giant lunar moth by moonlight. Now this was my most recent build and video, so I'm not going to go too much into detail about it. If you want to know more about this one, just check the video out. And that wraps up the world tour. Now for the matter of the world file. Now I am going to release the world file at some point. That it's going to feature all these NPC houses. But there's quite a lot more that I want to build in this world before I do release it. For example, I want ancient temples, I want secrets hidden underground all over the place, trapped fortresses that you can loot. I want to release a full-on adventure type world. So unfortunately, I can't say when all of that will be ready. It would be fantastic if I can time this release alongside the release of the new update, but I can't promise that either. So in essence, yeah, it's ready when it's ready. But apart from that, thank you very much for watching and have a wonderful day.